somehow find it slightly weird to be in a building working on these issues, and indeed to have spent last year's researching what is, the sewage of the human experience, really. So, if you don't mind, I feel much more comfortable having the party if we could just have a moment silence to remember the dead. And indeed, the Holocaust was about killing Jews, in case anybody had forgotten that, not in this room. So if you just join with me just for a minute, and then I'll natter at you. Thank you. Thanks. I want to just begin by thanking, well, a lot of people are thanked in the acknowledgements, so I'm not going to go through all of that, but I do want to mention two fabulous SOAS master students, Shanti Sattler now in San Francisco, and then Leah Owen, who made this whole expedition much more possible. I also want to thank my agent, I'm not sure if he struggled along, Darryl, for actually finding a publisher to take on what was at first quite an unlikely project, returning a lot of preconceptions. And of course, to thank Ben and his colleagues here at the library and mine at SOAS, but particularly Ben, running the Wiener Library, who amongst the Holocaust scholars and organizations that I've dealt with, was the person who wholeheartedly from the beginning understood the importance of what I, as an ingenue into a very closely preserved and guarded history, he was the first person really to get it and wholeheartedly embrace the project. So thanks to him. Human rights after Hitler. Well, I think it was Senator McCain recently said that the whole post-war system of 70 years was under threat. And I think what this book and other things I've been writing about, say is that that period in the 1940s was hugely more vibrant for human rights than we believe, that it wasn't a story of a few experts, Hector Alcatraz at Cambridge or Lemkin or the American Justice Jackson, but it was a popular movement for global justice. And uncovering that and seeing that was something that made me feel this was a story that had been kept too long from the broader public, and particularly at a time when our rights are astonishingly and uniquely apparently being threatened again. To discover not only that this was a vibrant story, but actually there's a continuity of the people who are keen on repressing these issues now and then, in that the coup de grace against all this work was delivered by none other than Senator Joseph McCarthy, a man in the pantheon of heroes of the current President of the United States, and who is otherwise notorious in a negative way in many respects, but his role in suppressing the war crimes work at the end of the 1940s isn't so widely known. And so that continuity of courage, and I think I also feel a huge duty to the people who did this work in those days. I'm not going to rattle on, this is not going to be a lecture. What I hope is that after about another 5 minutes of prattling, Ben will throw a brick at me or something, and we'll then have a bit of discussion and questions and some more drinks. I'm not about to reprise the book chapter by chapter. The trouble with us academics is you give us a platform and before you know it, an hour has gone by. Rest assured that's not what I'm going to do. But very briefly, who were these people? Well, you don't you can't rely upon a few intellectuals and political appointees to draw up charges against 36,000 accused war criminals, who, as a result of this process, 10,000 of whom were convicted in courts all over the world, from Shanghai to Oslo. That process was an unprecedented global network of some 16 states, and while here we talk about the Holocaust, quite rightly, this is also a story about China and India, the Philippines, and even, I found out almost at the end, Ethiopia, against the Italian crimes. It's a story also of individuals. A French police officer connected to the deportation system in France, who sends evidence to London about the deportations as a deposition. And some of us may know the lovely sitcom Allo Allo. Well, the missing scene, I think, in Allo Allo is René in the back of his cafe, licking his pencil and drawing up charges against the Gestapo drinking his beer in the bar. Because that's what comes from these pages, that the resistance were not just blowing up trains and so forth, they were also sending evidence to London from France, from Poland and other places. And amongst the most astonishing material, which I've reproduced, is that in this part of the Allied governments, at least, the Jews were not alone, in that there were formal charges against, from Hitler on down, at great length about the exterminations being carried out in Poland and elsewhere. And then when we look at Holocaust denial today and the need to combat it, we don't need any more evidence. But this is a different sort of evidence, because it's legally certified documents of many countries from the time, based upon escapees from the camps and resistance fighters about what went on. And that, I think, is very powerful at a time when it's too easily dismissed and people too easily forget, and the elderly are increasingly no longer with us. So, to my mind, that's why it matters from the perspective of Holocaust denial, anti-Semitism, as well as overall about the process of war crimes. If we look at Syria today in the Middle East, oh, it's too difficult. Well, excuse me, there were people here in London under missile attack, meeting to decide that it was necessary not just to defeat the Nazis, but to bring them to trial in large numbers. Not just the leadership, but the rank and file perpetrators. And that they had a system to interview refugees coming out of the camps and other places across Europe to draw up evidence against them. Now, if you could do that, what on earth excuse do we have now for saying that we can't do it? It wasn't a question we knew we were going to win. They were doing this in 42 and 43 and 44 when the outcome of the war was uncertain. And they were concerned about justice. And many of these people, including one of my mentors, were special forces activists, fighters, who were also concerned about war crimes. And that's a division today. You don't see the military at the front of this, but the citizen armies at the time were concerned with justice as well as victory. Now, this is turning into a lecture, so I will very shortly stop. But there's also a question of where. In his dying days, the commission staff, after it had been shut down, were working at 32 Russell Square, next door to one, now part of the British Museum, something they had forgotten. The commission itself operated out of the Royal Court of Justice on the Strand, and we even found some obscure news footage of one of their main public meeting just after the war. So this is in the heart of London. This is going on, as well as in China and other parts. And I just think it's important for us today to realise that some 10,000, even with the McCarthyite imposition, that even by their time, some 10,000 perpetrators have been convicted before courts, which from our analysis shows fair trial standards. And this is not like the process in The Hague, with just one or two leaders and a baroque process and trials that go on for years. It is, I think, a model that we can use to inspire us today. And there's a reason, I guess, which I'm most interested in this topic. It isn't just, oh, well, it's a secret, let me find out about it. It really is its value for helping reinforce what it is we do today. And I'll stop at that point. But just to say, I think my real thanks is towards the people who did all that work then. People ask me, well, it wasn't terribly difficult. And at some point I was whining to a dinner with my sister, and he's Dutch, and one of her Dutch friends in that wonderful Netherlands way just leaned forward and said, I don't think you're having quite as much trouble as they did doing this all the time, do you? So I don't know if you've got a glass, I haven't, but I would just end my remarks by saying thank you and raising a virtual glass, there we are in the virtual world, a virtual glass to the Commission. Thank you. And Ben has disappeared, but so I'm very happy to take some questions. I'll repeat them briefly, just